For centuries, the penal system had a singular, brutal mandate: lock the offender away, isolate them from society, and let the iron doors slam shut. It was a model built entirely on retribution and deterrence. But the modern era brought a different approach. We call it the new penology. Instead of simply punishing the criminal, this philosophy rejects retributive practices in favor of treatment, reformation, and rehabilitation. To execute this shift, you need a different kind of workforce. You can't just hire traditional guards. You need specialized correctional social workers. These are professionals trained in casework, psychology, and the preservation of human dignity. And here is where the theory hits a logistical wall. To acquire these rehabilitative skills, university students have to complete mandatory fieldwork, but they have to do it inside the existing traditional prison infrastructure. We are attempting to cultivate a modern, scientifically devised rehabilitative philosophy inside a concrete box built specifically for 19th century punishment. A mid-century academic evaluation by S.P. Srivastava maps out exactly what happens when these two operational models collide. Srivastava identifies a severe, systemic friction between academic ideals and bureaucratic reality as the primary obstacle to Indian correctional education. The idealized university curriculum operates like an open network, flowing freely between theory, casework, and research. But the correctional agency is a rigid hierarchy of closed blocks. When the student hits that border, the system actively resists them. To fix this broken educational pipeline, we have to look at it like systems engineers. We need to dissect exactly where and why the student's training shatters upon contact with the state apparatus. Fieldwork is the crucial step where university theory translates into practical application. Students run counseling sessions and organize group recreation for inmates. But the students are walking into an agency that operates on a strict police administration model. In this environment, secrecy is heavily guarded, and the operational rules are absolute. The custodial staff, the guards and wardens, measure success by two metrics: maintaining strict discipline and preventing escapes. Because social work requires a relatively free and open atmosphere to succeed, the guards view the students' methods as a direct threat. The relationship quickly turns hostile. The text makes this friction explicit, noting that for the agency personnel, the maintenance of discipline is an obsession and pathological disease. The staff holds a deeply ingrained belief that freedom given to delinquents will be misused, relying on coercion and heavy bureaucratic routines. By prioritizing control over behavioral change, the institutional environment becomes toxic to the core principles of the new penology. Drop a university trainee into this hostile environment without adequate institutional support, and the psychological toll builds rapidly. The student arrives with rehabilitative goals and a positive mindset. The existing staff responds by actively ostracizing them. The text points out that the student quickly finds himself isolated and is viewed as an intruder. Eventually, the student stops fighting. They submit to the rigid custody model, adjusting to the limitations of the agency with indifference and resignation. You can see the exact symptom of this defeat in their mandatory fieldwork diaries. The records become heavily sanitized, masking their failures and lack of real intervention. To appease their academic supervisors back at the university, students fabricate wildly unrealistic, dramatic success stories of their performance. The fieldwork pipeline does not produce reformers. It trains students to become silent, compliant cogs in a defective machine. The failure of fieldwork is only half the problem. The student's degree also requires them to conduct original criminological research. We can map their research on a scatter plot, separating studies into two categories: theoretical work on the causes of crime versus applied work on the efficacy of treatment. Indian research relies heavily on imported principles over indigenous solutions. Plotting student output, studies cluster entirely in the top left quadrant, repeatedly proving obvious links between poverty and crime. The bottom right quadrant remains empty. No data confirms whether correctional methods actually work. By endlessly researching the socioeconomic roots of crime while ignoring the actual mechanics of rehabilitation, the academic system starves the penal system of the practical data it needs to function. Beyond asking the wrong questions, the actual methods the students use to collect their data are fatally flawed. Students are heavily overburdened with coursework and are given impossibly short timelines to conduct meaningful scientific inquiry. The resulting sample sizes are statistically invalid. The document shows samples varying between 50 to 100 cases, noting students' knowledge of research methodology is grossly inadequate. Agencies compound this error. Citing strict secrecy, they regularly deny students access to official records. Locked out of the real data, students are forced to rely on secondary administrative returns. It's just a bulk of figures, completely stripped of context. The final product of this broken pipeline is a stack of theses filled with ambiguous language, unacknowledged borrowed material, and zero logical foundation. Practice without research is blind. This severe methodological deficit ensures that administrators have no real guidance, forcing them to make policy decisions based on hunch rather than uncommon sense. So how do we re-engineer this pipeline? We have to structurally bridge the gap between the university and the state. To fix the isolation students face in the field, the paper introduces a concept called joint supervision. Instead of staying safely on campus, academic supervisors must hold their student conferences physically inside the agency, with the agency chief present in the room. By forcing the agency staff to the table and securing their agreement on the students' progress, you transform them from hostile gatekeepers into active stakeholders in the process. You cannot break the students' isolation by leaving them alone in the field. The academic theoreticians have to face the agency administrators directly to erase the intruder dynamic. Next, we have to fix the research deficit. That starts by abandoning the practice of assigning students to isolated individual research problems. The alternative is organizing students into group cohorts, focusing them entirely on highly specific, controlled problem cases within a single institution. By coordinating their efforts, students can study different aspects of the exact same phenomenon. Instead of tiny, fragmented samples, they compile robust, comprehensive data. These new research cohorts must pivot away from the socioeconomic causes of crime and focus exclusively on the fundamental administrative and therapeutic problems they encounter in their fieldwork. But none of this works without one unyielding requirement: uninhibited support and collaboration from the government and the Criminal Justice Administration. The new penology cannot survive as a purely academic exercise. Until universities and penal institutions are structurally bound together in a shared pursuit of empirical truth, the promise of rehabilitation will remain locked behind iron bars.